Cornish Mutual, farming insurance experts.
Hello and welcome to Farming Focus, the podcast for South West farmers brought to you by Cornish Mutual. Today we're recording live from the Sustainable Food Trust tent at Groundswell, the farming festival now in its 10th year at Lanark Farm in Hertfordshire. The podcast tent is coordinated by the Sustainable Food Trust and made possible with the support of Groundswell and the Rothschild Foundation, helping to amplify a diverse range of voices from across food and farming. Today, we're going to be discussing and exploring what actually works when it comes to regenerative agriculture, what really improves profitability, what supports soil health, and what sounds good in theory but doesn't always really stack up on farm. As listeners will know, farmers are dealing with rising costs, policy change, unpredictable weather and pressure to make those long-term decisions in a really quickly changing industry. So this conversation is about cutting through the noise and hearing from today's guests about their experience. I am joined today by three guests with different vantage points. Friend of the podcast, Geoff Williams, farms at Terrafarmer in Cornwall. He won the 2022 Otter Farming Award and was named among the top 50 farmers in Europe in 2025. Will Marris is a regenerative agronomist at Terrafarmer, working with farms across the southwest on the practical transition to lower input systems. Jack Pearce is head of commercial at Terrafarmer, working across the transition from trial to farm scale. Welcome to all three of you. I'll start with you, Geoff, and ask you guys to come back on the same question, please. Could you each briefly introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about what you do, what brings you here, and what parts of your own thinking you're maybe hoping to expand or challenge while you're here?
Thanks, Peter. Why am I here? I came 5 years ago. I wanted to come back. One, it's a great social, I won't lie. But two, actually, I wanted to see not only how Groundswell had progressed, but also what new ideas were coming forward in regen, because I've enacted a lot of what I wanted to do, but I feel like I've just lost quite, what's going on at the leading edge. And I think coming back here, gained a bit of extra knowledge, what's the out there stuff. That's what I wanted to know. Yeah.
Getting off farm gives you that perspective. Also, try and find some of the newer ideas.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Geoff. Will?
Yeah. Hi. So I'm Will Marris, based in Shropshire. Work as a regenerative agronomist and soil consultant with Terrafarmer. So working to Wales as well. Background on a family farm over in Lincolnshire. Mm-hmm. Now moved to Shropshire on a livestock farm. And what I want to get out of today, I think, is sort of challenge my thinking. We've done a lot of trials on products, kind of the biological products, but actually, what works, why does it work, particularly in sort of the microbial space, I would say. So, yeah.
Okay, so it's that challenge, maybe sort of testing, proving what you've already heard before.
Exactly, sort of seeing what delivers. Is it doing what it's saying it's doing? Yeah. And also then understanding the why it's actually working. But then translating that practically to farmers. They don't necessarily always have to understand the why, but if it works, that's great, and how to get it to work the best.
Yeah, that last link in the chain is arguably the most important.
Yes.
So, Jan, how about you?
Yeah, thank you for having me again, Peter. It's good to be back in the hot seat. So in terms as to why I come to Groundswell, I think it's people. It's looking at meeting and connecting with old and existing clients, businesses, farmers, but also more importantly about starting a conversation with new businesses, new ideas, new farmers as to what's working, but more importantly, what's not working and why is it not working, and really trying to understand how can we become better as an industry, as advisors, as farmers, and hopefully try and solve some of the issues and problems which the industry is facing.
That's really interesting. So not just that forward-looking piece, it's also that backward-looking piece. What have we tried? What didn't necessarily work as well as we hoped it might?
100%. I think you can learn a huge amount of lessons by looking at what went wrong before you look about what's the next step. And I think agriculture, sometimes you, of course, will want to look at the next innovative thing, but actually just take a second, press on the brakes and look at why has it gone wrong and what can we do to change that. And I think in an industry where there's so much volatility, whether it's weather, commodity markets, being able to control the things that we can control on farm or within our businesses is super important.
Yeah. Okay. So with that idea of sort of having a bit of a retrospective for a second in our minds, what are you doing differently today, either on your own farm, or what are you advising people to do differently that you weren't necessarily 5 years ago? Geoff, you talked about coming here 5 years ago and what you saw then.
Yeah.
Can you sort of track the changes in that time?
Yeah. I mean, it's I've gained confidence. It's kind of confirming it works. Yeah, I've made it work. It works financially. It works environmentally. It works for the animals, and it works for me. And that's the kind of, I suppose, 5 years ago, a little bit kind of, okay, I want to experiment. I want to find out. I want to prove it to myself, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
I've done that, and I feel really assured and confident in the system I've got now. I enjoy the experiment as well, so I don't want to lose that either. So, but I feel like I'm moving forward at a place of I can choose to experiment rather than I have to change, or I'm not forced to do it. I'm doing it because I've given myself some space. I've created that resilience in the business. I've created the openness to allow some flexibility. So it's like, okay, let's try something new, keep innovating, exciting.
I heard you use a really nice phrase yesterday when we were having a conversation with another farmer who's doing similar things, but in the arable sector, talking about getting away from maybe just painting my numbers or a process, was it?
Flowchart farming.
That's it.
That's where I felt, I suppose, more like 10 years ago. I think that's where I was very disillusioned with industry, and it was around the time of Brexit and all that was being said around leaving the kind of protection of the EU, the volatility that was predicted and has become true, and at a greater level than I think anyone could have predicted. Mm-hmm. And knowing that actually the steps I took to build resilience were absolutely the right things to do.
Thank you. So, Will, what were you seeing and advising people to do on farm 5 years ago, and what pushed you to sort of change through that time?
Yeah, well, I suppose I kind of wear two hats here, and I've got the consultancy hat and then the farming hat as well. So sort of involved in the farm at home in terms of decision making and things like that. So 5 years ago, I was in more commercial agronomy, which was a different sort of system, which I enjoyed, but I felt like it wasn't going in the direction that I wanted it to for my career. So joined Terrafarmer 2 years ago to really go down the soil health, sustainability and resilience route, really looking at taking a step back, getting farms to do the basics really well before you kind of look ahead at more of the newer products out there, or the next big thing in terms of biologicals. So kind of in terms of consultancy, it was a change in mindset of looking at the more soil health focus. I think with a farming hat on, a big focus of mine and the farm has been nitrogen, looking at reducing nitrogen. So we're basically relying less on bought-in inputs. How can we grow our own nitrogen more, make our herbal lays work better, how the rotation can work with that, then also making what nitrogen we do apply much more efficient, safer for the plant and safer for the soil. And I think we've had some good gains over the last 5 years around foliar nitrogen and foliar application of nutrition in general. So I think that's probably the biggest changes with the two hats on.
Okay, so my next question was going to be about one change that's really had an impact on your farm, and it sounds like that would be one of them. So, Jack, for you, in the last few years for you, what have been the biggest changes that you've seen on farms and the businesses that you've been advising that's really delivered on soil health?
I think in terms of soil health and looking at the way we farm, Geoff touched on it briefly with basic payment scheme and agricultural support. I think that has probably been a safety net which has been supporting farms and has meant that has been their profit. Baroness Batter's review, which of course came out several months ago. I think that was a prime example, and a whole raft of reasons as to why agriculture is potentially struggling or in this opportunity space at the moment. I think in terms of things which have changed, for me, from a business perspective, Peter, it is margin as opposed to yield. And it sounds like Geoff was, of course, one of the trailblazers in that. And it's actually asking yourself the question as to why are we doing that? Is it because we want to do it and that's the aims of the business? Is it because there's social capital being provided? Is it to enable another enterprise such as shooting to happen on the farm, on the estate, or is it to make money? I think that's always a really good starting point, is understanding what are the aims of the business and what are the objectives. And I think it hopefully allows you to work forwards as to how can we hopefully achieve those.
That's really interesting. I've only managed to get to 2 talks so far while I've been at Groundswell, but the first one that I was at talked about really understanding your context and what it is that you are aiming to do, what your sort of holistic objectives are. And it really comes back to that. It's about having that wider view about what's right for you in your farm business. That talk also focused on economics, Geoff. And let's be honest, that's the bottom line for so many farmers. Lower input systems may mean lower stocking rates, lower yields in the case of cropping. If I'm a beef farmer in Cornwall running a conventional system and I'm told to take a productivity hit for 2 or 3 years before I see a return, what's that going to look like in pounds, and how many farmers really can absorb that? Because you could say, and I think a lot of people listening might say, that the ones that can absorb it, they're here at Groundswell. The ones that can't maybe aren't.
Are you talking specifically like those wanting to employ regenerative practices, or the loss of subsidy?
Yeah, specifically around that productivity dip where you perhaps going for the more regenerative practices.
Yeah. I mean, it's real. I can say, I'll testify to that one. It was difficult. It kind of hit at a bit of a dry summer as well, and
right.
I hadn't got my grazing sorted, and
when you first did this.
yeah, and it was a little bit scary there. Yeah. It can be tough, especially like basically my entire grazing platform now is GS4 and no inputs, herbal lay, no inputs at all, no sprays, no ferts at all, and moving away from rotationally grazed white clover and ryegrass with fert inputs. It does take time for the soil to adapt and those biological systems to take over. But yet this year, I have more grass than I know what to do with. Like I have never known a year like it. And if I saw where the farm was now 10 years ago, I don't think I could believe that it was possible without using inputs.
Right.
It has been transformative, and it's really moved my kind of perspective of what is possible.
Yeah. So that message to those farmers who are thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get through that productivity gap, is have faith in it. Plan for worst case.
Plan for worst case. Yeah. Advice. I'm not great on giving advice, but I would say plan for it.
Yeah.
But you will also, you won't be buying those inputs. So there will be a bit of a trade-off.
Okay.
And allow yourself to say, right, well, maybe this is a year 3, 4 where I have to allow cash flow to possibly buy some extra feed just to get me through these lean years. But it will change. But you do have to have a degree of faith. It is a leap of faith, I think. Yeah.
So we've heard a bit about Geoff's experience there, Will. Does that bear out what you've seen and heard on farms?
To an extent, but I think what I would challenge is the productivity dip. I think that can happen for sure, but I think where you have a managed reduction of inputs, I think that's the sweet spot. And I think that comes down to getting a good baseline. So that's in terms of productivity, in terms of cost of production. But from our perspective, and my perspective, I think soil baselining is really important. Key nutrition, I think calcium's a really important thing to look at in terms of soil structures. And then a managed reduction on the back of that, because then you know what your limiting factors are, and you can have inputs to switch away from a more synthetic system to a more biological system. And that takes time. A biological system, I believe you need to earn the right for it to work, and you need to nurture it. And things like, foliar feeds, molasses, actually kind of turbocharge that soil engine. And if you don't feed it, it won't produce for you. And that helps you grow more of your own nitrogen. So you're relying less on inputs. So it's a bit of a risk management tool in my mind. But I think baselining is really important. And then, a managed reduction is how I would frame it, to reduce that kind of productivity dip.
Yeah, I just want to quickly jump in off the back of that, because yes, I totally agree with you there. Because what I didn't do was prepare. I jumped in, threw myself off the parapet, went head first. I really wanted to do it, but I just didn't do the groundwork. Literally didn't do the groundwork. I didn't, sloppy soil testing. It was inconsistent. The herbal lays were just going all in to match the scheme, the countryside stewardship. So it was kind of like, bam, we have to do this in one go, 1 5-year period. We have to do the whole farm in one go. And it was like, it's not a great way to do it. Like, I think now there's so much more knowledge, so much more advice out there that, you don't have to, to do it the way I did it. So you probably can mitigate a lot of that productivity dip I've talked about.
Just to jump in on that, if I can, as another point, I think a lot of soil analysis and soil health is really going back to basics. You've got to have the fundamentals of your soil working first before you look at reducing nitrogen. I think one of the main limiting factors in soil that I see is oxygen, is aeration, and that's one of the most abundant things we've got. Get more oxygen into your soil, get your soils functioning to allow the biology to do its work, drip feed it to allow it to function. So I think kind of the ultimate don't run before you can walk sort of thing. Get the basics right and then work forwards. And then you can look at the more fancy biological products and Johnson Sues and, that's the end of it. And that you've got to earn the right for that. Get the fundamentals right. And that's a really good starting point.
Brilliant. And Jack, any thoughts on what's been said there?
I think that's a prime example of learning from mistakes. And actually for those farmers which haven't gone down that road yet of using herbal lays for an example, Geoff has earned those T-shirts and had those sleepless nights crying that he might not have enough grass. So make sure that you don't have to have as many sleepless nights. But I'm sure you still will have some, but learn from mistakes. And I think the agricultural industry is good at collaborating and learning and engaging and sharing knowledge. And it's definitely getting better with the likes of Adopt, HDB, being a lot more progressive. But get onto farm, learn from the mistakes and give it a go. I think one of the ways we look at it is really binary. You've got to either go the whole farm or no farm at all. And actually you could just try it in one field, one paddock. And I think that's the start to give it a go and dip your toe in the water.
Yeah, Will talked about just making those just couple of changes to start with, see what that's done compared to your baselines and move on. So you've talked there about going to those dark places. Geoff, you spoke earlier about being disillusioned. I've heard you talk before about there being a point where conventional farming kind of lost its meaning for you.
Definitely.
Can you tell us a bit about that? How did you feel? How did you get there? What was there a single point?
Yeah. It kind of coincided with basically my own personal mental health taking a real dive. I was very depressed for a while there and very, lost in terms of what am I doing? Like the farm is here. Everything seemed very doom and gloom at the time. And I think that's what I found so inspiring really about the regenerative movement was it had a message of positivity, which I think in a lot of conventional agriculture, it is sorely missing. I think of it was a key line to someone said, like, with conventional agriculture, you wake up every morning and say, what have I got to kill today to make this work? And I was like, God, that is so true. I don't want to do that for another 30 years. It doesn't feed my soul or something. It's not just that. I think this is where it can also become very personal. I think the farm and the emotion of farming or the family farm and legacy. We've talked about this before, but I think for me, it all ties in together there. And a regenerative farming kind of most closely aligned with my values. I think it comes more than perhaps just profitability at this point, more than just a business decision. It's something personal for me as well.
So you talked there about how it aligns with your values. Thinking about the context of the farmers listening to this in Cornwall, Devon, Dorset, Somerset, can you put into words your family's priorities when it comes to the farm? And maybe going a step further, perhaps thinking about neighbours, about your peers. I know we had some of these conversations yesterday. What are the challenges and how do we get people over those to maybe think about farming in this different way?
I very, very rarely question friends on their approach. I think simply because of what I've just said. Like, I think there's something about your personal values and philosophy, as it were, even to life and how you run a business. It translates there. There's parallels, and I feel that everyone is free to make their choice. Like, if someone wants to come and talk and have advice and I'll show them around, yeah, absolutely, I'll do that. But I do understand also that it operates in its context. Every business, every farm, every family. That context is so important. Yeah. And I'm sure these two could probably speak more to that. But the situation is so unique from farm to farm. So I don't tend to question people too heavily about why aren't you doing this or why don't you try this. And they know it's there. Everyone knows that organic's been around for decades, and if you want it, you go towards it. And so I let people make their own choices, really.
Yeah. I know some people not too far from here who would say the conventional's been around for decades, organic's been around for decades.
Hey, that's very true.
Let's not get into that. Yeah. So, gents, I can imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you will sometimes get asked into businesses, onto farms, by a party in that business who's really keen to try something different. Mm-hmm. But there are parties on that farm, around that kitchen table, who are less keen. How do you persuade them? If they're there saying, that's all very well, but that's not going to work on my land. What do you say? What do you do? Will you first?
I think I really enjoy those conversations because it's a good challenge, because I think a bit of healthy skepticism is very good because it does still have to make business sense. You can't just, yes, it's great. All these principles are brilliant. The principles of regen, I think they're all fantastic. You're still running a business. But actually the good thing about regen is it does make business sense because you're lowering your risk, you're managing your risk. So I think actually where you've got someone who's really keen and someone who's maybe a bit more cautious, there's a lovely middle ground of not trying to do too much too soon, but actually not just doing the same old thing you've always done. And I think that's a really nice mix. But what I would say is, what I tend to advise people is, well, don't change your whole farm. Pick a field, pick your smallest field, and try it. Split it in half. Conventional approach, a different approach. Test it, trial it, look at it, take pictures, do some soil analysis, some leaf tests, and see, what do the numbers say? What do the margins say? What do the gross margins look like? And then proof of concept. If it worked, brilliant, let's scale it up. If not, why not? It's a small field, so hopefully it's not a catastrophe for the business. And start small and then build. Almost like a managed reduction, but start small and build it up from there.
Really interesting that you're talking there about sort of that trial size and moving up to sort of really scaled up version. Jack, you work with trials and scaling up. What are the considerations to make it scale across a whole farm, a number of farms, a catchment even? What do you need to be thinking about there?
In terms of when you've got an idea to scale or an idea to try?
When you've got something that you've tried and you think, okay, we need to take this to scale now.
Yeah, so first I think for me, it's looking at the aims and what are we trying to achieve by implementing this change. And that's, of course, very context specific. If we're looking at changing a fertilizer strategy, is it over one crop or the whole crops across the whole of the farm? And what is the data? What is the proof that what we're going to do is going to have an impact? Of course, I think you see a lot of bugs and jugs is what they've been called in the past, which of course you'll be familiar with. Hopefully we are finding products which have a real life benefit, value and monetary impact on farms. Yeah. So once you've got a product or a concept which you can implement across the farm, I suppose it's about looking at rolling it out in as Will said earlier, a steady and gradual format which a business is comfortable with. Yeah. Every farm is different. And I don't think there's a silver bullet as to how to do something. I think really it comes down to the person, the business, the risk and reward type attitude as to what they want to achieve.
That's really interesting. Okay. So it's probably a bit of a cheeky question, but can you give me an example of something that looked really good on a trial plot and then maybe fell apart when it hit the farm? And we talked about learning from lessons. What was learned from it?
I probably have to defer that question over to Will because I don't want to name and shame anybody.
Absolute hospital pass, thank you. Yeah, we won't name and shame, but there are a few products where I would say visually you don't see a difference. you don't see the green stripe down the field where you've got treated and untreated. But actually what you do see is like the below ground biomass, or, the microbial biomass in the soil is actually better, or quality parameters are better. So it's not always visual, I would say. And I think that's, for me, the importance of testing, because then you can look at, actually, okay, yes, it doesn't look more green or it's a bigger biomass, but it's a better quality feed, it's a better quality crop, or actually you're stimulating the soil biology more underground. So the learnings from that is test, check it, to see actually what's the benefit above and below ground.
Jack, back to you. What conditions need to be in place away from the field? So I guess I'm talking about between the ears, and in the business more broadly. So financially, mindset, what conditions do you really need to see on a farm in order for those, not just the trials, but for those new practices to succeed?
I think one of the most important things is open communication.
Okay.
Both in terms of with the person themselves, being the business owner or the decision maker or decision makers, understanding what they want to achieve, but also farming businesses are incredibly complex, whether it's a small 10-acre farm or a big 10,000-acre estate. You've got vets, you've got agronomists, you've got accountants, solicitors, you've got a whole raft of farm workers. And I think making sure everyone is round a kitchen table on a monthly basis at bare minimum, or ideally even on a weekly basis, understanding what are we trying to achieve and just communicating. Because whether it's good news, bad news, ugly news, amazing news, it's still got to come out and be communicated.
Yeah. Okay. We've heard that an awful lot on the Farming Focus podcast, but it's sensible advice, and that's why we hear it so often for a reason. So, Will, you're working day to day with farms at different stages of this transition away from the higher input models. What does the financial picture actually look like with the farms that you work with? Not necessarily, the absolute top ones, but the most common, the average.
Yeah, the financials are interesting because essentially what we're trying to do is grow your own inputs. So you're trying to reduce bought-in feed, bought-in fertilizers, and that obviously has a business benefit if you're buying in less, fertilizer or concentrates. But also, it means you're more resilient as well. So you're less affected by price rises, price reductions, and I think there's ways of this farming technique of more regenerative farming in terms of monetizing it. Obviously, there's things like wild farm now. There's direct to market, and I think that's a really good business sense to kind of try to cut out the middleman and go direct to market. But also, you're sort of more self-sustaining really. Then, that's what I'd say.
Great. Okay. So, has anything that you've seen or heard at Groundswell, either so far this time or in previous years, really changed what you've done on your farm or what you've recommended to other people? Geoff, going to come to you first.
Yeah, that's. We went on the farm walk yesterday, and the guy there, Reese, said, "Remember, growing wheat is not a natural thing." And I was like, "Oh, it's one of those absolutely obvious things."
It was a real challenge, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I thought, and that's on a cereal farm, and you're like, oh yeah, so like that. You've got to go into this as like, we are trying to do something here that generally goes against nature.
Yeah, the idea of monocrop in a large scale, relatively large scale, is different.
Yeah, and it's just going back to those absolute basic principles of what we're doing here isn't natural. But how can we work with nature and mimic natural systems in order that it doesn't chew it up and spit it out? How can we do that? And I think that's where just keeping that mind of like, we are in some ways working against nature here. Let's proceed with caution and sensitivity.
Yeah. And for me, actually, getting those insights, getting that perspective is one of the great things about coming away from home and to something like this.
Exactly.
Well, same question to you. So what have you seen or heard at Groundswell, since you've been coming that's really challenged you or maybe changed what you do?
Yeah, I'd agree with what Geoff said there. I think it's kind of reinforced the fact of diversity of in every context. So business diversity, if that's diverse, income streams, diverse advice, diverse people on farms, you're getting new ideas, diversity in soil, in cover crops. So I think diversity as a principle is a really good thing. And I think we need that within agriculture, and almost people from outside the industry looking in with a fresh perspective, I think is really beneficial, because we're quite good at doing the same things over and getting into patterns. And I think to actually disrupt that and change and check that, I think is a really beneficial thing. And I think diversity is quite a nice kind of umbrella term for kind of a guiding principle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, there's this interesting piece happening at the moment. I've spoken to a couple of people at Groundswell already. One person who works for the Royal Horticultural Society. There's plenty of people from banks here who you might say are sort of allied to agriculture. But also we're seeing this movement at the moment, in the last days of this premiership in government, of expanding what we consider food and farming to be. One of Minette Batter's suggestions was to broaden that so that it's considered as a larger part of GDP. And I think that's an interesting piece that we're looking at, that diversity, making agriculture, food and farming broader. So Jack, what are you looking forward to at this year's event that you're tempted to make sure you hear more about?
Oh, what a great question. Being that we're halfway through the first day, and I've been about 100 meters from the stand, the wrong day to ask me, but I think that 100 meters I have made away from the stand, I've probably spoken to 20 people. And it's collaboration. It's getting conversation started with new people, with old people, with existing farmers. And I think for me, it's about getting off the farm. And fine, tickets there is a cost to a ticket, but actually I think it's incredibly good value for the resource, the talks, the speakers, the companies you've got here. And you can get a lot from it. So I think it's get off the farm, and the whole point of collaboration, and get your old pen and your notepad and go around, pick up all those business cards, and make sure you get enough evening reading for the next 6 months. But it's, collaboration and speaking to people.
Very good, very good. Well, we now know what you like to spend your evenings doing, at least, Jack. It's a good one. So, as we draw the session to a close, if you could put one question to some of the other speakers here at Groundswell today, not necessarily one that you'd ask politely in a session, but maybe one that you want a really straight answer to, what is it? And feel free to put your hand up if you want to go first on this, because I appreciate you might need a bit of thought. Go on, Jack.
Do consumers care? Do consumers care where their food comes from, and whether it's regenerative or cheaply farmed? Are people price sensitives, and is that an education thing that we need to work on as an industry, or is it marketing, or is it something else? But do consumers care about high integrity British products?
Yeah. I just heard Professor Chris Van Tulleken speak, who's the author of Ultra Processed People, and fascinating talk about what ultra processed food is and how we can maybe change the way it's labelled. But actually, for me, there wasn't a call to action there about what farmers can do. It wasn't obvious about how we can really change the gears on that one. So maybe that'll be mine if I get the luxury of answering my own question. Will, you know?
I'll go next. So what? You've come here, you've spent your money, you've talked to people. What are you going to change? What is different? And I say that a lot when looking at soil tests and things. Spent all this money, it's great. So what? What are you going to change? What practices are you going to do differently? Quite a simple one is so what?
And actually, I guess that's one that you could maybe reflect back to some of your customers. What do we do next? Brilliant. Thank you, Geoff.
I'd like to know something for each speaker's kind of personal motivations to go down the regen route. Is it values? Is it some kind of philosophy that you enjoy about it that's different, or, the why, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. We are near the end of the show, and I just need to try and encapsulate all the good stuff that we've talked about in just a few points. I think I can't just keep it to 3, but really it all comes under one umbrella, and it's how we move forward. I think the first thing which came to mind was the need to understand what our objectives are. What are we trying to achieve? Do we want to keep doing what we're doing, or is there a bigger reason, a bigger why that we want to try and answer? And then it's prepared. Don't just jump in. start with the baselining. Make sure we understand what our soil is doing. Get the right soil test in place. Tissue analysis. These things aren't difficult to get. They are available. We can get them. And then don't try and change everything. Just change a couple of things. Understand what you expect to see and what you do then see, and understand how those changes have influenced the test results compared with your baseline. But make sure you've got the fundamentals right first. So we talk about, soil compaction, getting rid of that, making sure there's enough oxygen to actually make the most of these changes that we're going to make. Then learn from our mistakes. Make sure we look at what we've done and understand how we can get a better outcome next time. And then finally, make sure we communicate. We keep talking to people about what we're trying to achieve. And that helps, I think, us to articulate and to really get fixed in our mind where it is that we're heading. So that would probably be it for me.
Cornish Mutual, farming insurance experts.
Sadly, we got to finish there, but a huge thank you to my guests, to Geoff, to Will, to Jack for sharing your experiences and your insights. Thank you to everyone who's been here and come along. Thank you to the Sustainable Food Trust for hosting us in their wonderful podcast tent, and to the team driving the desks who are the unsung heroes of this whole thing. If you'd like to hear more conversations like this, you can follow their podcast or the Farming Focus podcast on your favourite podcast platform. So make sure you go there and hit subscribe today to stay up to date with future episodes. That's all we've got time for today for the recording live at Groundswell. So for now, it's goodbye from me, it's goodbye from our fantastic panellists and everyone in the Cornish Mutual podcast team.
Cornish Mutual, farming insurance experts.